Hello and welcome to the September 1st week of edition of Mastering Dungeons. I am Shawn Merwin here with the right on time Teos Abadia. Hey Teos, how you feeling today?
I'm a little tired. I had an impromptu work session, but in addition to that, I just got here from PAX. Drove late last night home from PAX West in beautiful Seattle, and it was a heck of a convention. Really fascinating. So one thing is, uh, post pandemic, trying to grow. I think trying to see whether they're going to grow the way Gen Con did,
Mhm.
and not quote unquote grow the way Origin said they did. Um,
Right.
but it was hard to assess because the convention now has a brand new summit center that was built by the city in collaboration with PAX. It's a beautiful
Wow.
building, but I was talking to a friend of mine who was kind of mentioning how PAX is the kind of convention that PAX West has felt like every little nook and cranny had something. And now, because of this big building, it's more like there's a lot of empty space, and the maps are not quite right, and there were a few things that were kind of going on. But I went to a fantastic Acquisitions Incorporated game that leads into the new season, and then I got to be one of the main people organizing the D&D games that were taking place there through Baldman Games, repping. And
Yep.
it was amazing. We got just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people playing D&D, having an absolute blast. And PAX has always been at the forefront of demographics. So I remember in like 2000, I don't even know, something early, right? During the 4E days, you would see so many young people coming to play D&D, so many couples coming to play D&D. And now at PAX, it's to the point where you cannot make any guess whatsoever about a group of people that comes up who might be the DM, who might have experience. So like a little kid with the dad. And I say, can I interest you guys in a demo of Dungeons and Dragons? And the dad says, yes, my son has really wanted me to try this for some time.
Right.
Because the kid had been to some camp, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
you name it. I mean, you could not ever pick the DM out of a group because there was such a wide diversity of players there, and it was fantastic to see tons of people playing D&D for the very first time. So it was great. Hats out to all the DMs and collaborators that I worked with there. It was amazing, really cool. And I'm
And now
tired.
you get to come now you get to come here and in a stupor do the podcast. Well, Teos, luckily I've got some energy today. I'm ready. I'll carry you through this if necessary. Uh, by the end, I will be like flat on my back and you'll be going strong, but that's okay. We will get there because this is my favorite time of the year. Fall,
Mm,
September, beginning of September, school's back, temperatures are starting to cool here in
yeah.
Western New York, at least generally, and it feels good. And I'm energized. So let's jump right into this with our listener corner, starting with Lazael via Twitter, who says, listening to episode 154, I feel like the DM's Guild is suffering from the same issue that Drive Through RPG has, which is there are so many more new items being dropped daily that you can't determine what would be useful and what would never see the table. And this is so very true. And it leads to a few questions. The top of mind for me is how can Wizards of the Coast turn their third party license and their reach and their infrastructure into a win-win-win situation
Mm,
for themselves, for third-party publishers, and for the fans, for the players. And we talked about this before with Wizards can't publish everything that people want. So third-party publishers are there to fill that void. Uh, and so it feels like this comes back to that. It comes back to how can we let everyone create content, but still have content accessible in a way that doesn't just overwhelm people. And
mm,
I did for Dragon Plus a column for a couple of years called The Best of the DMs Guild. And that was sort of one of the two reasons I wanted to do it was to say, hey, here is some content that you might be interested in. Let me curate it for you a bit. Um, incidentally, I also wanted to make it a design column. Like,
Mm,
look at what this product does design wise. This is great about it. This could probably use a little work. Here's a pitfall that this product
yeah.
fell into. But I had to strip away any sort of negativity from my
Mhm.
column. So it turned, I had to keep focus on the positive constantly, but it was fun to do. And I felt like it was serving both the fans and the players. And
Mm.
I feel like we need that, whether it's community driven or third party driven or wizards driven, it needs to be there. And that leads to further questions like, what will the DMs Guild look like next year and in 2 years and in 10 years? What will D&D Beyond look like? What will the virtual tabletop landscape in terms of a sales vehicle look like? And how much content will it be? Overwhelming? Will it be curated? Will there be categories? How will all of that work? And it's something that's constantly on my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one answer that I would give to anyone pondering this question of what it should look like is there is a whole laundry list of things that DMs Guild publishers have been asking for a very long time, and they've never been granted, the vast majority of them. Yet the place did become successful because it became a go-to place for a while. So it was people would go there, would see things, would buy things, but none of those changes were ever made, none of those requests that would allow a publisher to easily have their products be found.
Mhm,
And obviously, publishers a lot of times care about things like, can you find all of my products, right?
mhm,
Can you find everything that I've done? Um, if you're looking for a particular subject, will you find the product that I made for that subject? And the interface and all of these other issues around the DMs Guild, they don't really allow for that. And when it's a trapped location where you can only publish a product there or publish the product, a product they publish there cannot be anywhere else, that is a huge limit, right? It's why we see the Keith Bakers of the world say and the MT Blacks say, I'm no longer going to be on the DMs Guild because it financially doesn't make sense if you can be large enough to have successful crowdfunding, which actually is a surprisingly low bar. You know, there are a lot of people that can break out. It's not easy by any means, but it's possible. And so I think looking to the future, I would love to see the exclusivity of the DMs Guild drop away.
mhm.
And I would want to see these features that have been requested for a long time come back in. The last thing I might think is something that can draw attention and help to galvanize, but it has to be done carefully. I think the adept products and for a while even Adventures League were sort of a, hey, look, here's a great example of how good it can be. But if it's too good or it has such early access that it overwhelms the things that would be official, then it shuts down people from publishing, right? I remember Eric Mengi and I were going to write a as we just when it came out, Waterdeep, we were thinking to ourselves, oh wow, you know, there's this tavern. Let's write a guide to writing a tavern. So we start doing the work, and just a few days later, out comes the fully written adept product on taverns, which was great. So no loss to the world, you know, because it was really a fantastic product that I love. But that inside track could shut down a creator. So there's so many aspects to this I could talk about, but I think that my hope is that D&D will think about these things, right? Think about
Mhm.
what it is that creates a vibrant community because it's not easy. It doesn't just happen on its own. And if you just leave it to its own devices, then you'll get what you're getting on the DMs Guild, where it does start to get it loses its value, it loses its capability of serving both the audience and the publishers.
Yep. So thank you for that question, Lazael. And we had a question come in from Magus via our Patreon Discord less than an hour ago. And the question is this: is there a D&D book or supplement that contains sort of examples of rules for everything else?
Mm.
When starting to DM, I would have been totally lost if I hadn't watched Critical Role. I'm talking about things that come up in basically every adventure, like making a camp, foraging for food, keeping watch, gambling, searching a corpse or a room for clues, using those blank blank tools you are proficient at. Uh, how I know you can do it in a myriad ways. but I would love an official book with examples on how you can do this sort of thing to make it more interesting and fun for everyone, especially if they would list multiple ways of handling the same thing. Since I doubt they will ever make such a book, I assume they being wizards. Is there an unofficial one?
Mm.
And since this question just came in, I didn't have a chance to like think back or go through the DM's Guild or go through places to look for a book like that. And many times there are pieces of those things scattered throughout. As the question says, I skipped out that part, but the question says, I'm sure there are pieces of this everywhere. But the question actually comes back to game design and the design of the game that you're playing, because all of these things can be fun. They can be interesting, but they can also not be fun and not be interesting. And unless the game incorporates these rules into its overall design, then it's problematic to just add your own rules for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want things like making a camp or foraging for food to be fun and interesting and important, then you have to ask yourself, what are the game mechanical or narrative consequences for success or failure of those things? And how do those consequences interact with your gameplay based on the game design? So take, for example, foraging for food. You're running an adventure. You rest for the evening. You forage for food. What are the consequences if you succeed? What are the consequences if you fail? Unless that is built into the game mechanics itself, it's hard to make it work. With Fate, the rules would support that, because you could say, oh, you succeeded at foraging for food. You gained the aspect well fed. Oh, you failed. You gained the aspect gnawing hunger. And then those things, those aspects are already part of the game. With D&D, you could do that, but again, what are the consequences? What are the failures? There's no good mechanic for that. Well, you could say, well, exhaustion is a great mechanic for that, and it's probably in the rules already, where it says if you don't get enough sleep or if you don't get enough food, you gain a level of exhaustion. But that can be way, way rough for certain players, for certain characters, for certain character classes that rely on different rules. So tacking on something can be fun, but it's hard unless it's built right in.
I've got some thoughts on this. One is that when I think of this question, I say to myself, yeah, D&D did that. It's called Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And that's, I'm not being silly. I mean, it has rules on sleep. It has rules on tool proficiencies. You know, it has a lot of these types of activities. It has downtime rules on gambling. A lot of the things that are mentioned in this question are in Xanathar's. And some of them have been more successful than others. You know, I really don't see people using the tying knots information here or the tool proficiencies. Despite the fact that they're a cool idea, they don't see a whole lot of play. And even sleep, I think not enough people are using that to begin with, to where you hear it mentioned often and you don't necessarily think about it. Things like downtime, you do see, right? And that has made an impact in the game. So I think that maybe when you look at Xanathar's and then you look at Tasha's backed off some of these sort of optional systems because they probably had not proven to be as popular as the rest of the things in Xanathar's. So I think it's tough. You know, are there other sources like this? Yeah, there totally are. I've seen a number of them. I couldn't name them because honestly, I find that they run into the issues that you're talking about, Shawn, which is the mechanical use of these things sometimes will intrude upon a game and sometimes are perfect for a game. So a lot of times when I buy a supplement or I see a supplement that talks about these kinds of things, they serve as a sort of inspiration, and I may or may not use them in a given campaign, especially once I talk to the players, right? So Tomb of Annihilation, in theory, you could go hungry and thirsty and run into, you know, terrible things in the water that churn your stomach. And when I asked the players how they felt about this sort of thing, they were like, yeah, we don't want to do that. We don't want to run out. We don't want to track resources and run out of water or forage for food. Okay, there go all those kinds of rules. I didn't even to look at them, right? Because they just didn't want that in the game. So I think it's touchy. I think it's difficult for probably for Wizards to officially devote that space to these kinds of subjects, and unofficially for any one designer to hit the various table needs you're going to need to hit to really create a great system for those things. I don't know.
No, I agree. It depends. And like you said, it depends on the player, it depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are situations where I, as a DM, might think this is great. We're going to model this trek across the desert, and these rules are going to be perfect. And those same rules that work perfectly for this add drama and add consequences and add narrative. If we're doing it, going from one city to another, just even though you could use the same rules, they don't add enough to the story or the game to use in that situation. So
I think
it's hard.
that may be one reason why skill challenges were so popular in fourth edition, even though they were so obviously imperfect, is that they were very customizable to allow you to tell the particular story you wanted to about that trek, or and it could be any kind of trek, right? The moving through the city looking for something. It could just capture those kinds of things. Hey, you're moving through the forest and you're low on food. This skill challenge will include that in some of what we're trying to do. And that was a nice way to hit those narrative notes without needing big systems. You could just use that one system. And even though skill challenges weren't a perfect system, it gave you that framework and it was good enough for what a lot of people wanted to do with it.
Yeah, it gave you the framework, and it made you, as the game master, think about consequences before you got into it, rather than while you were in it, then trying to come up with something. So
yeah,
that was the framework itself was nice to put into the collective consciousness of game masters who might not have thought of situations in that way. So thank you, Magus, via our Patreon Discord for that question. Let's jump right into news and commentary, because we got some news and we got some commentary coming your way, starting with Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. If you were a digital and physical customer, you can now access the Shattered Obelisk right now. I was not. I thought I was, but I only bought the digital version. So I got on this morning and I was all ready to dive in and read this. And I realize now I have to wait 2 weeks. But if you're interested in what's in it and you don't have the early access, you can go out and look at the 20,000 previews commentary that's out there. I'm not going to, because I want to read it and digest it without any outside noise. So you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks to hear our thoughts on it, but hang in there because there will be thoughts.
I have access to it.
You I'm muting you. That's it. Mute. Okay. But
this is so cool.
Yeah, this is so cool.
Oh man, Shawn would love this. Too bad he can't see it today.
Too
like
bad.
I can.
Too bad. But you know what I can see, Teos? You know what I can see?
Tell me.
Demiplane has launched their 5e Nexus as of like 2 hours ago. It just came out. And what is in this early access that you can get? You could get the Tome of Beast and Tome of Beast 2 from Cobalt Press. You can get the Tal'Dorei Reborn book from Darrington Press, or you could get the Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire from Ghostfire Gaming. Those are the three companies that are highlighted here in this first day of 5e Nexus and Demiplane. I didn't even know this was happening. I just happened to see an Adam Bradford tweet that said we're live, and I just, Jay, I'm waiting for Teos. I'll check out. What? Oh, okay. But how interesting is it that the Tal'Dorei Reborn book is available both on Demiplane and on D&D Beyond for the same price?
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. I mean, good. That's the way it should be. You know, and what I would, and D&D, someone at D&D might go like, wait, why is that possible? And to which I'd say, stop it. Think about it the other way, which is that either your platform's awesome or it's not. Right. So either D&D Beyond is a fantastic place to read a book and use the tools and so on, or it isn't. People will go to wherever good tools are. They'll also probably go to you because you're official anyway. So look, D&D, you're gonna get the leg up anyway. You have advantage on the check, but
Yeah.
but just focus not on the competition. As to be, to give credit where credit is due. D&D usually focuses inwards rather than outwards, and that's what I think that's a good call, and they should keep doing that. Which is, don't worry about whether someone else has the content. That's not taking money away from you. It's spreading your brand far and wide to people who may want it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
So good. I'm glad that's the case, and I hope that is
Mhm.
the case more often. And I'm glad to see Demiplane and that good team doing this. That's cool, and very cool that Grimhall is on there.
Yep. So there's a link in our show notes to both Adam's talk that went on today, as well as to the 5e Nexus. And they're also, if you sign up for Demiplane, they're doing giveaways, and you can get books for free if you win the
Mm-hmm.
promotion and so on. So check that out at demiplane.com. You were very interested in the EN World article on freelance pay and the survey that they did. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. There had been, as we shared on the show not too long ago, someone had done a survey on pay. But the way the questions were structured made it a little hard to break things down. So Ian World did their own version of a survey. They have now gathered and shared data submitted by 1,120 anonymous freelancers. And the mean rate they found and interestingly, they asked not about history, but about just, I think it was this year. So it was really focused on what you are earning right now versus at some point in time. It also grouped, asked you to sort of describe kind of what grouping the company that hired you was in, rather than name a specific company. So the mean rate for writers was 8.5 cents per word. And they had done an earlier survey in 2015, which far fewer. It wasn't even a survey. It was speaking to various companies. Back then, it was about 3 cents a word as a mean.
Mhm.
So that's a big increase. The 2023 mode is 10 cents per word, which makes sense because that is a pretty common rate that you hear once you're getting good work. And the most
Mhm.
common grouping is in the 5 to 6 cents per word range. The highest, which was a single occurrence, was 40 cents per word. And I'm proud to say that that was me. I got paid really well by a company for a project. And I'm very thankful for that. And I think more people should get paid that rate. Um, and the lowest, which, well, there were some people who were unpaid, but the lowest that was paid was under 1 cent per word, which was not me this year, but it's been me in the past. Although I didn't
We've been
accept
there.
the job, but I was offered, I think 0.02 is what I was offered once. The survey was also looked at company size, so that you could see that the leader companies like Wizards of the Coast and Paizo had the highest word rates, followed by large and single person companies. Medium and small companies paid the lowest, though with a very high variance. And it's interesting to me that kind of seeing that you can get into sort of a middle group that can pay well versus a small group that's anything goes. Like you can't figure it out. Um, uh, I've also heard recently, I don't know about Paizo, but I've heard enough about Wizard rates to know that they're paying very well these days compared to, say, what it was like back when I did a lot of writing for them. And so that's really good to hear. Time in industry helped, so you could expect, or you would see in these survey results, a steady increase in word rate from being your first year of writing to, say, 16 to 20 years of writing. Interestingly, if you worked more than 21 years, you tended to earn slightly less than if you had worked for 16 to 20 years. And I wonder if
Mhm.
that sort of folks have just sort of been doing the same thing for the same companies, and those companies are kind of taking advantage of you, right?
Mhm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. 75% of work was work for hire, 11% was licensed, and 2% had the rights eventually revert to them. And that may be folks particularly drawn to EN World, which has often used that approach. And then some people just didn't provide answers. But yeah, I thought that was really fascinating. In general, it's encouraging that the trend is upward. It's a good increase from when this last happened. I will say, as I've covered in my Success in RPGs episode on this, it's really important to look at what even 25 cents a word can allow you to do. Like if you're trying to live in Seattle on 25 cents a word, and you try to think of how many words you must write in a year to pay for the rent, that is daunting. And then, and I looked at that at the video. So if folks are interested, can look up my Success in RPGs video on the subject. I think we still have a long ways to go.
For sure. And speaking of pay in the industry, just this morning, Pelgrane Press put out a note saying that they were looking to hire a, quote, project editor. And so I saw that. I was like, we cover these things on the show. Okay. An editor. We're seeing Wizards, again, hire in-staff editors, on-staff editors rather than freelancers. So I wonder what it looks like for Pelgrane. Pelgrane is a well-known role-playing game publishing company. They have a solid line of products. They have lots of goodwill in the industry. So I clicked on that to see what would they pay a project editor. And then I started reading and I went, whoa. And it wasn't a good whoa. So here's what it said. The successful candidate will work with Pelgrane management on the key books on Pelgrane's growing list of core titles and supplements from conception to delivery. They will be responsible for managing relationships with freelancers. Okay, some editors do that. Printers and colleagues. Printers? Okay. Exploring market opportunities. Huh? And for scheduling, budgeting, and quality control of key titles. They will also be involved in art direction and editing. So a good eye for design and excellent attention to detail is essential. I was like, wait a second. This is not an editor. This is a project manager. This is a producer, plus an editor, plus an art director, plus a marketer, plus a social media. And so I was like, wow, okay, well, it must be this is going to be a pretty good paying job. The position for this is an initial 6-month contract with the possibility of an extension for the right candidate. The position is for 30 hours a week. I'm like, okay. And we'll be starting immediately on recruitment. Pay will be commensurate with skill and experience, but we anticipate a pay range of between US $20 to $22. Now, I assume they mean $20,000 to $22,000, with the possibility for a truly phenomenal candidate to earn more. The position doesn't include health insurance, so if your country doesn't have universal health care, you will need to have your own health care provision.
And unless they mean that that's an hourly rate. There is a PDF you can look at, but it does not say anything about what it pays. This is really, and
even $20 to $22 an hour for 30 hours a week, you're not making much.
Yeah, and this is a ton of work. You have to have a really great skill set to do all these different things. It is amazing, and it's interesting because Pelgrane today was sharing this and saying, please share this far and wide. Like it sounds like they feel very proud about it, and I love Pelgrane Press products. I'm a fan of their staff, and I do know that they struggle with how to sell things, but that's where sometimes the answer isn't pay people very little so you can keep doing what you're doing. Sometimes the answer is go back and look at what you do so you can find a different way to do it, and look around at the rest of the industry, because there are companies out there that for this kind of job are paying a substantial salary, right? $100,000 a year and more for this kind of work. And so, 75 up easily. And for fewer activities, right? Not because this is so far ranging, and it's not just Wizards doing that, and so it is troubling. It's frustrating to see this. It's too much work, too little pay, and Pelgrane Press is amazing. I'd love to work with Pelgrane Press, but this is the kind of job that you look at and you think, I don't even know what would you be doing in a given week? It would drive you mad.
Yeah, and it's I mean the pay is one thing, assuming that it's covering all of those things, but it's asking for failure. It's asking for failure.
Hmm.
And I feel like the one thing is it's only 30 hours a week, but to do all of those things, you're going to need more than 30 hours a week
Yeah.
to be successful. At even creating a small product.
I don't know how it
Uh
can be 30 hours a week because are you helping with like odd jobs in all of these categories based on what they don't have the ability to cover? Like it's just strange.
yeah,
It's really strange.
yeah. And I'm not saying this to like get down on Pelgrane because, like you
Right.
said, it's a company I've worked with and for, and I like their products and I like their teams, and it's odd that if this is what they need to pay in order to keep themselves going, that's bad news for the industry.
Yeah. And I
So
mean again, I look at that. I do see companies out there that struggle with. They'll say, I can't pay anybody a decent rate, and then I say, well, I don't think you're making products. You're making products in the way people did 2 decades ago or a decade ago, not the way that some companies are making products today. And you should look at what the best companies are doing and emulate that and learn from that, because there are ways to pay better salaries. You may not get to make all the products you want to make, but it's just like gaming stores, right? Used to be a business that would be like, I just want to sit around in a building that has all of these cool things and sell, and then they'd go out of business because, well, you need to do more than that to be, and especially in these days, to have a successful RPG store, you've got to really be a smart business person to do it, and you have to look at what successful gaming stores do and emulate that. Yeah.
yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that and see. We've already had people in our Discord saying, "Hey, did you see this? I can't wait to hear what Teos and Shawn have to say about this." I was like, "It's already in the show notes," and we've already have some comments. So
Hmm.
I'll keep an eye on that. There was an interesting blog called The Pastel Dungeon that had a post about choices, information, and meaning that explored the different types of choices and what they mean for play and players in role-playing games. And Teos, you were the one that delved into this, so I'm going to sit back and listen to your thoughts.
It was a really nice blog that talked about how it breaks down the types of choices that happen during play in fantasy RPGs of all kinds, and how, there are all these choices, but only some of them really matter. And looking at what kind of choices you're offering and what they mean can be really helpful to then structuring those kinds of situations in games. So, the order in which you speak with two NPCs may have no impact. So you can choose whether to speak to, the baker or the candlestick maker first, but it doesn't matter. It's just sort of a silly choice, an unimportant choice. A false choice could be one where you think it matters, but it actually doesn't, right? Whether I go left or right on the trail, but either way I go, I face the ogre. Well, seems like I made a choice, but if I go and double back, the DM will have to admit that there's nothing there in that other way, right? Um, and if there's no information to go on, right? So I have a left and a right fork, but no information to go by. Then I have an arbitrary choice. It feels like a choice, but I'm not really making a choice other than just randomly. But now, if I provide things on the left and things on the right, and those things give some sort of indication, some sort of hint, now I've got a real choice, right? A non choice when you have options, but one is obviously far better. So a choice in the road, and one says, shortcut to the castle, and the other one says, terrible, dangerous swamp from which no one ever emerges. You probably just want the shortcut, and so then it's not really a choice either. A choice is informed if they can predict the result of each option. A choice is meaningful if options have tangible measures and tangible and measurable consequences. So I liked really how this broke it down, and we've got a link in our show notes to the pasteldungeon.blogspot.com in the specific article. Yeah, I really enjoyed that read. I thought it was great.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have a couple creator spotlights. The first being Jeff Stevens of Jeff Stevens Publishing, who has a Kickstarter going right now called Weapons of Legend. This is a 5e supplement containing 80 magical weapons to add to your game. 40 of these weapons have progression rules, allowing a character to acquire those weapons early in their adventuring career, and then as they progress, their weapon progresses as well. They can complete tasks, finish quests, and gain experience, and their weapon evolves along with them. And there are also 40 traditional magical weapons which do not progress. Second creator spotlight is JVC Perry, who has a Kickstarter going for an adventure called The Folk from Harrowthorpe. This is a pulp horror adventure for 5th edition, filled with mystery and the uncanny. Will you uncover the secret of Harrowthorpe? Well, if you buy it and play it, you just might. This is a tier 1 adventure, which will take the characters from levels 3 to 4. And as with the other things that JVC Perry has done via Kickstarter, it looks like it's got pretty good production value, good art, good maps, and so on. So both of those are available on Kickstarter right now.
Yeah, those are two great creators, and I just might have a Weapon of Legend in that Jeff Stevens Kickstarter.
There you go.
I'm not going to spoil it, though.
No. Does it progress?
I mean, I don't know that I can say, so I'm not going to say anything about whether it has flumps involved or not.
I should have known. I have to mute you again.